Welcome back, everyone. We're going to be starting Chapter 6 this week online. And so this video is going to introduce Chapter 6 PowerPoint to you, and then we're going to go into Handout 6A. So let's move to the PowerPoint really quick. And just to discuss the handout here and our PowerPoint to start off with, the skeletal system has several functions, and our slide number 3 here in the PowerPoint goes over these different functions. The first function is support, so obviously the skeleton supports your body. Protection is number 2, so it's going to protect vital organs, your heart, your lungs, your brain, all protected by the skeletal system. Your skeletal system is going to help you move, so movement. Muscles are attached to your skeleton, and so when muscles contract, it pulls your skeleton and moves your body. The skeleton also functions as a storage structure. It's going to store things like blood cells, fat, and minerals like calcium. And then the last thing is your skeletal system is going to be where most of your blood cells are made. We'll talk a little bit more about that in an upcoming chapter, but blood cell production is going to be done mainly in your skeleton. So if we go to the next handout, we're going to talk for the first couple of handouts that we do, we're going to be talking about bone structure and histology. So what the bones are made of, how the bones are built, and their structure. So we're going to go look at handout 6A first, and then we'll check out 6B. I also have a supplemental video that'll be posted that you can watch that's going to have some good information about your bone histology. Okay, so if we go back to our handout here, I am going to make myself invisible, and we're going to look at this handout. Now, histology are tissues. How the cells build the tissues that make up the bones. So bone histology is bone tissue. Now, bone is a type of tissue called connective tissue. And you'll learn this more in A&P 2, but there's only 4 types of tissues in the human body. And connective tissue is one of those. So just as a reference here, we have 4 tissues. We have epithelial tissue. Epithelial tissue are linings. So they're tissue that lines our body. Then we have connective tissue. Connective tissue is kind of named after what it does. It helps connect and hold our body together. So it is a support tissue. And that's what the skeleton is. Then the third type of tissue is muscle tissue. And muscle tissue is going to be mainly used for movement. And then we have nervous tissue. So there really are only 4 types of tissue. Nervous tissue is going to move electricity. So when we look at bones, they are a connective tissue. They are a support tissue. Now, bone tissue is made out of 2 things. It's made out of a matrix and then cells. So the matrix is the stuff around the cells. So if you want to look at it this way, imagine we've got bone cells all right? And bone cells are kind of spread out. Connective tissue cells don't touch each other. They're kind of spread out like this. All of the stuff in between the cells, all of the fluid, all of the protein, whatever is surrounding the cells, that's what we call a matrix. And essentially all connective tissue has a matrix and they have cells. Now, when it comes to bones, the matrix, all the stuff in between the cells, are made up of an inorganic mineral, calcium phosphate, calcium carbonate. These minerals make up an inorganic component to all of that stuff in between the cells. And then we have a living organic part that's made of collagen fibers. So we've got these minerals in here that are not alive, but then we also have this protein called collagen that also makes up this matrix. Now, the minerals are what make the bone hard. So the hardness and the strength of the bone tissue is because of these minerals. The organic collagen makes the bones flexible. So I've got a little diagram here. If we didn't have the mineral part to make the bones hard, the bone would be like a dog chew toy that you could just tie in a knot. All right, because there'd be too much flexibility, not enough hardness. On the other hand, if we don't have any of the collagen, the bone will be super hard and it will shatter like glass. And we don't want either one of those happening. So we have a balance of these minerals and this organic protein called collagen. So that makes up the matrix part of the bone tissue. Next we've got cells. And there's three types of bone cells. There are osteoblasts, osteocytes, and osteoclasts. Osteoblasts are immature osteocytes that build bone. So they're going to be creating bone all the time. Osteocytes are those mature bone cells that are just kind of hanging out, not doing much. They're relatively inactive. And then we have osteoclasts that come along and eat and reabsorb, break down the bone and recycle it so that new bone can be made. So look at this diagram right here. This diagram is basically my picture that I just put up like that. It's just drawn a little bit better. So you can see all of these tan areas are the bone matrix made out of collagen and minerals. Then the cells are going to be these blue areas. See how they're spaced apart. Now in bone tissue, the cells are going to be living in little lakes called lacunae. So it says cells live in lacunae lakes. So you can see the cells in the tissue, but they're surrounded by little lakes. I always think of the osteocytes as living in like little houseboats on a lake. Let's get this in focus here a little bit better maybe. All right. Now all the little lakes are far apart, but they're connected by canals. These canals are called caniculi. And this is so the bone cells can send messages back and forth to one another. Of course, they're chemical messages, right? So they can send ions and other types of molecules back and forth from cell to cell through the caniculi canals into the lacunae lakes. Now, osteoblasts are going to create this. They're going to build this matrix and the cells. The osteocytes are the guys living in their little houseboats on the lacunae lakes. And then osteoclasts can come along, and if we need to repair or rebuild, they can tear down this structure and then have the osteoblast come and rebuild it. So these are the components of bone tissue. So we've got a matrix made of inorganic minerals and organic collagen proteins. And then we have these cells, the osteoblasts, osteocytes, and osteoclasts. So these make up what we call the histology of bone tissue. Now, further on in the chapter, we're going to talk about how all this stuff works to repair, rebuild, and make new bone. But all bone is made of these components. All right, so this concludes Handout 6A. Next, we'll go into Handout 6B, and we'll talk a little bit more about histology. All right, so take it easy. I'll see you in the next video.